Adrian Kessler's boots thudded against the hollow steel corridors of the derelict transport ship, each step echoing like a bad drum solo in an empty hall. He had a habit of narrating his own actions under extreme stress, something he'd picked up in countless firefights. And now, floating in the shadow of a ruined galaxy, he muttered to himself, "If this ship starts talking, I swear I'm charging it rent." The metal hull groaned above him, the kind of sound that made every seasoned soldier's instincts scream in harmony with every horror movie he'd ever regretted watching. But Adrian had survived worse. Mostly because he didn't take himself too seriously. The universe, he'd concluded long ago, was far too indifferent to care whether you made a hero out of yourself or tripped over your own shadow. The mission had gone sideways in ways that would have impressed a comedic writer more than a military tactician. His drop team had been ambushed by a coalition of alien raiders whose ship designs made his stomach twist with both awe and mild nausea. Sleek, angular vessels that glimmered in colors humans hadn't even named yet, and weapons that bent light into solid forms before burning through the hull like a chef flambeing dinner. Adrian had done what he always did when facing overwhelming odds. He yelled something inappropriate and charged anyway. In this case, the words had been, "Fear me, I have lasers," which had been met with a chorus of confused alien screeches and the near collapse of a vital support beam. Somehow, against the laws of physics and very poor timing, he had survived. Now he was stranded on Urandor, a moon that seemed to have grown out of a dream for alien ecologists. Vast floating forests, gravity patches that tilted your sense of balance like a cosmic funhouse, and skies streaked with auroras so vivid they made Earth's northern lights look like cheap neon. Adrian had been wary at first. Alien civilizations didn't generally hand out tea and biscuits to enemy combatants, even when you accidentally saved a small contingent of their scouts from a collapsing cavern. But when the Urandorians arrived, he immediately noticed one scout whose long ears flicked with unsettling precision every time she spoke. That was Liara. She appeared calm, almost regal, but her eyes held the kind of humor that could slice through your armor like a plasma blade. "Do humans always trip on their own gravity wells?" she asked, her voice smooth and edged with amusement. Adrian had just rolled under a low-hanging bioluminescent branch, narrowly avoiding impalement, and had crashed into a floating bush that laughed, or at least it made the sound of a laugh according to Urandorian translation pads. "Only when they're trying to look heroic," he replied, brushing the leaves off his shoulders and grinning as if he had meant to do it all along. Liara's ears twitched again, a subtle but unmistakable signal of her amusement. Adrian noted it like a good soldier might mark enemy positions. Liara wasn't the kind of alien you underestimated. Her species, the Urandorians, had survived wars that made humanity's history look like a kindergarten argument over crayons. Her long ears weren't just for show, they could sense fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, giving her near telepathic intuition on the battlefield. Adrian, for all his bravado, had to admit he had never seen a human able to dodge incoming energy bursts by thinking 3 moves ahead. Yet somehow, through sheer luck and audacious improvisation, he had. Now, standing in the glowing forest of Urandor with Liara inspecting him like he was a mildly entertaining experiment, he realized his usual humor might be the only thing keeping him alive. "Humans," Liara said, scanning him with the faintest edge of skepticism. "Fragile, fallible, loud, and yet somehow persistent." Adrian grinned. "Persistent is my middle name," he said, wiggling his fingers in mock grandeur. "Well, it would be if my parents were more creative than calling me Adrian." Liara's ears twitched. Adrian considered this a victory. He could survive battles, he could even survive diplomacy, but earning a laugh from an alien scout who could probably dismantle him with a thought. That was a rare skill. Their first mission together, if it could be called that, involved rescuing a small band of Urandorian scouts trapped in a gravity-shifted canyon. Adrian had attempted heroics in ways that were simultaneously helpful and terrifying. He had improvised a rope from his own tactical harness, swung across a yawning gap, and landed face-first in alien mud. "I meant to test the landing," he said, wiping green sludge off his helmet. Liara sighed but didn't intervene. She was amused, and that amused attitude was worth more than reinforcements. In the process, Adrian began to notice the little things about Liara. The way her ears twitched when she considered a strategy, the way her voice could sound simultaneously commanding and sarcastic. and how, despite being superior in almost every measurable combat metric, she appreciated the chaos of a human's improvisation. Humans were unpredictable in ways that even advanced alien intelligence sometimes could not calculate. Adrian mused that perhaps his greatest strength was his total unwillingness to behave predictably. The rescue ended with Adrian awkwardly dangling from a vine-like energy tether holding onto the last scout, who complained the entire way down. "If you drop me, I swear," the scout began. "I wouldn't dare," Adrian said, and immediately felt the tether snap. He tumbled, twisting in zero-G, and somehow landed upright on a narrow ledge, scuffing his helmet but otherwise unscathed. Liara's ears tilted back in what could have been approval or disbelief. "You have ridiculous luck," she said, shaking her head. Adrian bowed, as if to an audience. "Luck is just courage poorly disguised." As night fell, the floating lights of Urandor's bioluminescent flora shimmered like a celebration of absurdity. Adrian, still mud-splattered and helmetless, leaned against a tree, catching his breath. Liara joined him, her long ears brushing the glowing leaves, and for a moment they shared silence that didn't feel tense. It felt oddly human in a way that Adrian found comforting. In a galaxy where most species could vaporize each other for minor slights, here was humor, here was resilience, and here was the first spark of an alliance that might just save more than a handful of lives. Adrian stared up at the alien sky, streaked with strange constellations and drifting shards of asteroid debris that glittered like distant city lights. He thought about the war he had survived, the humans who counted on him, and the alien worlds that didn't yet know whether to fear him or love him. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he smiled, thinking, if I survive this, I'm going to have one hell of a story to tell, and probably a few more terrible jokes that might accidentally save the universe. Adrian awoke to the sound of what could only be described as very enthusiastic snoring, or perhaps a low-frequency hum that passed for sleep among the Urandorians. His body ached in new and inventive ways, muscles complaining as if they were filing a formal grievance against him. He rolled off the moss-covered platform where he had been semi-reluctantly assigned a cot, and narrowly avoided colliding with one of Liara's long, elegant ears, which had draped over the edge like some kind of living antenna. "Morning, genius," she said, voice still laced with amusement. "Try not to trip on your own limbs today." Adrian groaned, rubbing his jaw and pretending he had not actually contemplated this exact scenario the previous night. "Tripping is part of my battle strategy," he said. "Confuses the enemy, or at least me." Liara's ears twitched, a subtle signal of either approval or disbelief. Adrian could never quite tell which. They began the day with training, which for Adrian meant a bizarre blend of human combat drills and alien simulations designed to test reflexes in zero-gravity chambers, on antimatter balance beams, and under fluctuating temporal fields that occasionally made his movements seem slower or faster than reality allowed. Adrian had always thought humans were adaptable, but adapting to situations where the floor could suddenly become the ceiling, or where gravity could invert mid-jump, required a level of spatial awareness that made his head spin like a poorly tuned starship engine. Liara, of course, moved through these exercises with elegant precision, her long ears providing constant feedback to subtle shifts in the simulated environment. "You humans make me nervous," she said dryly as Adrian, in a spectacular display of unintentional acrobatics, collided with a floating energy barrier that smacked him squarely in the chest. "Mostly because you survive stuff you clearly shouldn't." Adrian grinned, brushing imaginary dust off his uniform. "That's courage," he said. "Or sheer luck, or perhaps a combination of both, which I like to call Adrian's special sauce." By midday, the training had moved outside into the floating forests of Urandor, where gravity patches floated unpredictably, and the air shimmered with bioluminescent spores that tickled the skin and occasionally caused sneezing fits that could register on alien communication sensors. Adrian had tripped 3 times in the first 10 minutes, narrowly avoiding falling into a shallow crevasse on one occasion. Liara caught him with a flick of her arm and a sigh that sounded suspiciously fond. "You know," she said, "you could just, I don't know, not fall." Adrian blinked at her. "That would be boring. Where's the suspense in perfect coordination?" Liara's ears twitched in a gesture that Adrian eventually concluded was her version of an eye roll. The afternoon brought a mission. scouting a recently discovered energy rift that had been emitting strange bursts of radiation capable of destabilizing nearby space lanes. Human sensors were laughably inadequate, so Adrian and Liara were sent to investigate in person. The rift shimmered like liquid glass suspended in midair, arcs of raw energy dancing across its surface. Adrian approached it cautiously, noting the way his pulse seemed to sync with the undulating light. So, he said, if this rift decides to eat us, do we get bonus points for style? Liara snorted, the sound bouncing oddly off her long ears. Try not to be eaten, she said. Style points are irrelevant if you're vaporized. Adrian bowed dramatically, pretending to present himself to the rift as if it were some cosmic judge of fashion. Navigating the energy rift proved challenging. Temporal distortions caused his movements to lag and then snap forward unpredictably. At one point, he reached for a stabilizing handhold and accidentally knocked Liara's comm unit into a floating pool of iridescent liquid. Oops, he said, genuinely sheepish. That was, a demonstration of quick reflex recovery. Liara's ears twitched so fast it was almost alarming. You're impossible, she muttered, though her eyes betrayed amusement. The situation grew tense when the rift pulsed violently, a wave of energy knocking them both off balance. Adrian, in a feat of chaotic brilliance, managed to grab an energy conduit and swing himself to solid ground, but in the process launched Liara's emergency pack into a low orbit. Well, he said, dusting himself off, that went almost exactly according to plan. Liara glared at him, but there was a faint upward curl to her lips. Adrian counted that as a win. After the rift was mapped and stabilized for human and alien research teams, the duo returned to the floating forest base, where a small celebration awaited. Urandorian engineers presented them with glowing badges of recognition for their daring work. Adrian accepted his with a flourish, inadvertently tripping over the pedestal but managing to turn it into a dramatic roll that drew laughter from the assembly. Liara's ears tilted in amusement, and she muttered, I suppose there's a reason humans survive wars after all. Adrian grinned. It's called charm, he said, and maybe a little luck. That evening, they shared a quiet moment atop a gravity-anchored cliff, looking out at the alien sky streaked with auroras, drifting asteroids, and the distant glimmer of nearby civilizations. Adrian unwrapped a small packet of Earth rations which, in his usual fashion, he insisted were gourmet. Liara shook her head, accepting a single bite with a bemused expression. You call this food? She asked. It's edible, he replied. But mostly it's proof that humans survive on willpower alone. They laughed together, the sound mingling with the alien night, and Adrian felt a rare sense of belonging. Despite the strangeness, the danger, the unpredictable physics, and the odd cultural misunderstandings, he was finding a place here. By the time night deepened and the glowing spores drifted lazily through the air, Adrian realized that something significant had begun to shift. His human ingenuity, audacity, and often ridiculous sense of humor were starting to earn him recognition, not just from Liara, who had begun to respect him more than she let on, but from the wider alien society. He was no longer just a stranded soldier. He was becoming someone worth watching, someone capable of influencing events across worlds in ways even he didn't fully understand. Liara, silent now, let her long ears brush his shoulder lightly, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement. Adrian tapped his fingers against hers. You know, he said, if we survive this rift nonsense, I might just write a memoir. Liara's ears twitched, a sound that was almost a laugh. I expect it will be more fiction than fact, she said. Adrian grinned. Fiction's way more fun anyway. And as they settled into the alien night, with floating lights flickering and gravity patches gently nudging them this way and that, Adrian felt the stirrings of something far larger than personal survival. He was learning alien strategies, mastering impossible physics, and most surprisingly, forging a bond that made even the most dangerous missions feel almost enjoyable. In a universe that had tried to break him at every turn, he was discovering that courage, cleverness, and the occasional ridiculous joke could do more than save your life. They could make you a legend. The galaxy seemed quieter than usual, though Adrian knew better. Quiet in space never meant safe. It just meant that something new and potentially catastrophic was brewing somewhere between the stars. He and Liara floated side by side aboard the cruiser Urandor's Grace, a vessel built for both diplomacy and disaster management, depending on which way the universe tilted that day. Adrian had been assigned, officially, to mediate a dispute between two rival civilizations whose warships now hovered precariously near a contested asteroid field. Unofficially, he had been told, in no uncertain terms, to keep his jokes to a minimum. Impossible, he muttered under his breath, rubbing his hands together as the console glowed in alien script. Liara's ears flicked, a signal of skepticism. "I said a minimum, not zero," he whispered, earning a sharp side-eye from her. The two fleets faced each other across the void, their sleek hulls reflecting the kaleidoscopic light of a nearby quasar. The leaders of both sides had agreed to a parley aboard neutral ground, but the air crackled with tension, the kind that could turn casual negotiations into an interstellar incident in seconds. Adrian, wearing his human uniform slightly askew because he had insisted on adding a touch of personal flair, a small, almost comically ill-fitting cloak, stepped forward. He inclined his head in what he hoped was a dignified manner and, failing spectacularly, tripped over the edge of the platform. The resulting flail sent a nearby communicator spinning across the deck. Liara groaned but didn't intervene. The leaders of the rival fleets, oddly enough, looked on with intrigue rather than anger. Adrian grinned, picking himself up. "Just demonstrating gravitational hazards," he said. "Safety first." Liara's ears twitched in what might have been amusement or disbelief, and he decided that counted as a win. Adrian's approach to diplomacy was unconventional, to say the least. He had learned that humor, when applied judiciously, or even recklessly, could disarm even the most war-ready alien commander. He launched into an exaggerated tale of his own battle scars, punctuating each pause with an absurd gesture or dramatic grimace. And by the time he reached the part where he claimed to have wrestled a rogue energy drone while balancing on one foot, both fleets were laughing despite themselves. Liara, standing beside him, couldn't suppress a smile. It was the first time she had witnessed Adrian wield humor as a weapon of peace rather than distraction or self-preservation, and she found herself strangely impressed. After hours of negotiation that involved holographic projections of territorial boundaries, quantum maps of the contested asteroid field, and several minor incidents involving Adrian accidentally triggering holographic explosions, an agreement began to take shape. He suggested, with a straight face, a zero-gravity dodgeball tournament as a symbolic act of trust, and surprisingly, both sides agreed. The first few rounds were chaotic but effective. Diplomats who had once threatened annihilation were now flinging soft energy spheres across corridors, laughing as they floated upside down, their long ears and elongated limbs tangling in ways that made Adrian feel oddly at home. Liara's ears flicked repeatedly, catching stray spheres mid-flight, her agility and grace a constant reminder that she was a creature of unmatched precision. Adrian, meanwhile, demonstrated the art of strategic clumsiness, somehow turning every accidental tumble into an advantage. By the end of the day, the asteroid dispute had been resolved without a single shot fired. The fleets departed in mutual acknowledgement, leaving Adrian and Liara alone on the observation deck. Stars glittered across the void, and Adrian felt a rare, profound satisfaction settle in his chest. He had begun this journey as a human soldier, a single point of action in a universe of vast and indifferent complexity, and now he had become something more. A legend whose courage, creativity, and humor could influence entire civilizations. Liara turned to him, her ears brushing against his shoulder in a gesture of camaraderie. "You've changed," she said quietly. "Not just humans, Adrian, you." Adrian smiled, feeling the weight of her words. He thought of all the missions, the narrow escapes, the absurd moments of slapstick survival that had somehow saved lives. He remembered the first time he had met Liara in the floating forests of Urandor, the fruit incident, the rickety rescue from the gravity-shifted canyon, the chaos of the energy rift. Each event had shaped him, teaching him patience, empathy, and the subtle art of blending audacity with strategy. "Change isn't so bad," he said, "especially when it comes with long-eared guides and zero-gravity dodgeball." Liara let out a soft laugh that vibrated slightly in the air between them, a sound that Adrian filed carefully in his mind for later recall. Weeks passed, and Adrian's reputation spread like a comet streaking across multiple star systems. Aliens from disparate worlds began to refer to him not just as a human soldier, but as a symbol of what collaboration, courage, and a bit of irreverent humor could accomplish. Liara continued to work alongside him, her initial skepticism giving way to admiration, and eventually, a deeper bond that neither dared define in formal terms but both recognized in every shared glance and subtle gesture. Adrian found himself sharing Earth's ridiculous customs and jokes with alien crews, who either laughed or groaned depending on their sense of humor, while he learned stories of civilizations that had survived for millennia through resilience, ingenuity, and a stubborn refusal to take themselves too seriously. The climax of Adrian's journey arrived during a festival held in his honor on Urindor, a celebration that brought together dozens of civilizations whose histories were interwoven with his own chaotic heroics. Aliens of every shape, size, and sensory array mingled under floating lights, sharing music, food, and tales of battles barely survived. Adrian, ever the performer, told a story of his misadventures with the energy rift, adding embellishments that made even the stoic elders laugh until tears shimmered in their eyes. Liara stood beside him, long ears twitching in amusement, and for the first time, Adrian felt the full weight of his transformation. He was no longer merely human. He had become a bridge between worlds, a symbol that courage combined with compassion and the occasional well-timed joke could ripple across galaxies. As the festival wound down, Adrian and Liara drifted away from the crowd, floating above the luminous forests where their journey had begun. He looked at her, at the subtle tilt of her ears, the glimmer of amusement in her eyes, and realized that in all the battles, missions, and improbable escapes, he had found something more enduring than fame or recognition. He had found connection, respect, and an understanding that even in a universe vast enough to swallow stars whole, courage, humor, and trust could create islands of light. Adrian extended his hand and Liara touched it lightly with her own, her ears brushing against his fingers. "I suppose humans aren't entirely hopeless after all," she said softly. Adrian chuckled. "And I suppose aliens aren't entirely terrifying," he replied. "Mostly just complicated." They laughed together, the sound mingling with the gentle hum of the alien night, and for a moment the galaxy felt quiet, safe, and absurdly wonderful. Adrian knew the war was over, that his missions had ended, and that he had been changed forever, not just a soldier but a legend, a mediator, and a friend to those he had once thought impossible to understand. The stars twinkled above, auroras danced in the distance, and in that vast, infinite expanse, Adrian Kessler finally understood what it meant